I'm in such a terrible situation that I'm deeply embarrassed to even admit what's happening. By embarrassment, I mean I'm utterly humiliated. How else can I put it that my wife, after 7 years of marriage, is having an affair with my stepdad? Yes, my wife slept with my mother's husband. I'm a 38-year-old man, married to Celia, 38 years old, for 7 years. Our relationship has had its normal ups and downs. The downs were mostly because my wife thought I was too close to my mom. She even called me a mama's boy. I won't deny it because my mom passed away 2 years ago, and I loved her deeply. I'm grateful that I was able to show her the love and care she deserved. She raised me all by herself and provided the best she could, often going beyond her means. My mom was a single parent until she met Andrew about 10 years ago. Andrew was a divorced man in his early 50s when he married my mom. I couldn't understand what my mom saw in Andrew that made her marry him after being single for 2 decades. To me, Andrew was like a non-entity. While my mom was alive, I used to visit her twice a week, but my interaction with Andrew didn't extend beyond basic greetings and a smile. I don't know why I couldn't accept him as a father figure, but I never showed my reservations to my mom. I was happy that my mom found a companion in her later years, and after her passing, Andrew didn't play any role in my life. I didn't even meet him after her funeral, even though he still lived in her house. Things took a disturbing turn when I saw him sitting with my wife, his arms around her. It wasn't a friendly or paternal embrace. Their body language, or I should say their chemistry, didn't sit right with me. Given our family dynamics, this was all very strange. As I mentioned, I was never close to my stepdad, and Celia wasn't either. Witnessing such a level of comfort between them made me extremely uncomfortable. I was in my car, and they were at a roadside cafe. I had left work early that day to meet an old friend. The location where I saw them was far from my home and my office, a place I don't usually go to. I met my friend but was preoccupied the whole time. He kept asking if something was bothering me, and I just said it was work-related. How could I tell him what I had seen on my way? When I got home, I couldn't help but confront Celia about what I had witnessed with Andrew. Her face turned pale, and she seemed at a loss for words. Eventually, she admitted to having lunch with him. When I asked why all of a sudden, she claimed they ran into each other, and he suggested having lunch together. The way I was looking at her made it clear I had seen something I shouldn't have. She went on to explain that Andrew was deeply upset about losing my mom and that she was trying to console him. She said he's a lonely old man with no one to talk to, which is why he held her hand while expressing his grief. You see, I didn't mention that I witnessed him holding her hands. Instead, I saw him putting his arms around her. Their conversation didn't appear to be one of sorrow for my mom. While they weren't laughing, their body language had a flirtatious vibe. I chose not to say anything but didn't buy her explanation. I decided to investigate the matter myself before confronting her further. Celia works as a nail artist at a beauty salon, which means she works on weekends and has weekdays off. This wasn't an issue between us until recently when she became excessively preoccupied with her work. We started having frequent arguments about this, as she wasn't devoting enough time to our relationship. She countered that I was being overly needy after my mom's passing. She argued that I used to visit my mom twice a week, so her absence shouldn't bother me so much. However, that wasn't entirely accurate. I used to visit my mother on weekends and on some weekdays when Celia had to work. On her days off, I always made sure to be home on time to spend time with her. She used to complain previously that I was a mama's boy, and now she was accusing me of being needy. While these issues persisted, I saw her with my stepdad, which added to my frustration. A few weeks later, during Thanksgiving, the most recent one, she suggested we invite Andrew. Her direct suggestion surprised me. She explained that Andrew was living alone and had no one, so as an extended family, we should invite him. I pointed out that she never invited them when my mom was alive. She replied that it was different then because they had each other to celebrate the occasion, and now the elderly man was alone. In the end, I agreed, partly because I wanted to observe how they behaved in my presence. I can't say their behavior was normal, now that I know the truth. However, if I didn't know the truth, nothing they did would have raised suspicion. I remained mostly silent throughout the dinner. I never liked him, and my suspicions made me resent his presence. I felt he also sensed my discomfort, and the dinner was overall quite awkward, with both of us eating quietly while Celia attempted to break the silence with trivial topics, earning only forced smiles from both of us. The burden on my heart was becoming unbearable, so I decided to devise a plan. I thought about checking her phone, but that was tricky since it was locked, and I didn't want to raise suspicion by asking for the password. Instead, I came up with another plan. I informed Celia that I had to go out of town for a couple of days for work reasons. On the planned day, I left home early as usual and headed to my office. However, beforehand, I discreetly planted a GPS device in Celia's car, allowing me to track her movements remotely. Just before the afternoon, she drove to Andrew's place. While I wanted to catch her in the act, I had concerns. What if I confronted them and they were simply sitting and chatting innocently? It would make me look foolish. So, I reached out to my friend Keith for assistance. I confided in Keith about my suspicions and asked him to pay a visit to Andrew's place. It was a cautious plan. I instructed him to record any incriminating evidence if he found them engaged in anything inappropriate. The house had a password-protected lock, and I hoped that Andrew hadn't changed the PIN. Keith was worried that Andrew might become suspicious of an intruder, so I advised him to explain that the front door was open, and he was just there to check on him. The front door didn't lead directly into the living area. There was a small hallway, so his actions wouldn't arouse suspicion. After some convincing, he agreed. Keith entered the house but couldn't find them in the hallway. He discreetly peeked into the bedroom with his phone's camera switched on, cleverly positioning the phone in his shirt pocket with the camera lens protruding to avoid detection. To his dismay, he witnessed both of them without clothes, cuddling. He quickly muttered an apology and left the house before they could realize. Andrew followed him outside, questioning his unexpected presence. Keith explained that he had come to check on him, but it was all right. He would return later. Keith then got into his car and drove away without facing any confrontation with Andrew or Celia. However, Keith made a foolish mistake. He accidentally had his front camera on instead of the back camera, so no useful footage was recorded except for Andrew and Celia reacting to Keith's sudden appearance. Nonetheless, I received the confirmation I needed. I had already packed 2 sets of clothes and my toiletries before leaving the house that day, so I went to Keith's house. His wife was away visiting her parents, and he insisted that I stay with him until we sorted out the situation. Celia reached out to me, inquiring about when I would return home, but I didn't respond. I essentially ghosted her. She bombarded my phone with endless texts and calls, assuming I was away for work. This all happened 4 days ago. I've already contacted a lawyer remotely. I have no desire to ever see her face again. I plan to serve her with divorce papers and have her removed from my house. Update. It took 10 days for the lawyer to send over the divorce papers. Celia wasn't ready to sign them and wanted to have a discussion. My lawyer suggested that we explore the possibility of an out-of-court settlement, since it could save us a lot of time and money. You see, I have a regular job in sales, and my financial resources for lawyer fees are limited. Plus, I can't afford to take too many days off work for court hearings. So, I agreed to a meeting with Celia in the presence of my lawyer. However, when I arrived for the meeting, she insisted on a private conversation. I was reluctant, but my lawyer advised me to go along with it, as long as I didn't make any commitments or agree to anything she proposed. He set some boundaries for the meeting, like no physical contact, hugging, or making confessions. I felt disgusted being in her presence. She even tried to hug me, but I pushed her away. She claimed it was all a misunderstanding. Having read numerous cheating stories on Reddit, I knew the typical excuses cheaters give. I sarcastically replied, "Oh, sure, you were just trying to help out a poor old man who was lonely, right?" She admitted that what Keith had seen was true, but insisted it was just cuddling and nothing more. Yes, cuddling without clothes, of course. But that wasn't the end of it. What she said next left me baffled. She claimed she did it to protect our future. I couldn't believe it. She said that if Andrew married someone else, that person would inherit my mom's wealth, and our family's property would go to someone else. I retorted, "So you slept with my stepdad to become my stepmother and take my mother's wealth. Do you see how messed up this family dynamic is?" Her explanation left me feeling dizzy with disbelief, and I stormed out of the meeting room. When I returned, my lawyer wanted to know all the details of our conversation, and I told him everything. He couldn't help but chuckle for a moment, but was particularly interested in the inheritance my mother had left behind. My mom had inherited a massive mansion from her uncle, a property far beyond my financial means. Interestingly, Celia had always coveted that mansion. After we got married, she even suggested that we move into it. However, I was adamant that my mom shouldn't have to leave her house. Celia argued that since I was my mom's only son, the house would eventually be mine, so why not move in right away? This disagreement caused frequent fights between us. Eventually, I decided to lie to her, saying that my mom had willed the house to Andrew. Little did I know the consequences of that lie. Celia pursued my stepdad with the sole aim of gaining ownership of the house. There was another crucial piece of information that Celia remained unaware of. After my mom passed away, I didn't transfer the house's ownership to my name. I wanted Andrew to continue living there as long as he wished. Transferring ownership to me would have made it seem like he was living in my property, which I was sure he wouldn't appreciate. Additionally, the process of transferring the name is costly, and I was facing financial constraints at the time, so I chose not to pursue it. I'm grateful I made that decision because if I had transferred the house to my name, Celia would have been entitled to half of it in our divorce. Who knows, maybe she wouldn't have pursued Andrew under those circumstances, but a cheater tends to be a cheater no matter what. Yes, my mom had bequeathed the house to me, but Celia was unaware of this fact. Celia attempted to make me reconsider the divorce by suggesting that she would manipulate Andrew into gifting her the house. She claimed that if I didn't divorce her, the mansion would become ours. I chuckled at her proposal and politely declined, saying, "Thank you, but no." I wished her luck with her mansion. She smirked and commented that I was losing out by going through with the divorce. I smiled and replied that I couldn't care less. Whether she had always been this foolish or was simply putting on an act to save face from humiliation, I couldn't be bothered. Celia was well aware that I didn't possess substantial wealth except for the savings in our joint account, which was divided between us during the divorce. I feel a tremendous sense of relief now that the divorce is finalized. If Celia had discovered the truth about the mansion's ownership, she would never have agreed to the divorce, and I couldn't bear the thought of sharing my mom's inheritance with her. Celia essentially dug her own grave by confessing her ulterior motives for dating Andrew. I plan to use this revelation against her to push Andrew out of her life. During our divorce proceedings, I observed Andrew picking her up from court and assisting her with legal matters. I patiently awaited the conclusion of the divorce to expose her true intentions and witness her reaction. Now that it's all over, my next step is to expose Celia's deceit. Update. Once my divorce was officially completed, I decided to text Andrew and share the details of Celia's confession with him. He was surprised and pointed out that my mom had willed the mansion to me. I acknowledged that fact, but mentioned that Celia was unaware of it and might approach him to request the mansion. My intention wasn't to help Andrew. I simply wanted to shatter Celia's illusions. She had been dreaming about inheriting my mom's mansion. Andrew revealed that Celia had been subtly inquiring about his will lately, asking who would receive his inheritance. However, he didn't grasp her true intentions because he didn't possess substantial wealth. I didn't feel obligated to maintain any loyalty to Andrew, so I left the conversation at that point. Shortly after, I received a call from Celia. Normally, I would have ignored it, but this time I picked up because I knew what she was going to talk about. She was shouting on the other end, demanding to know why I hadn't informed her about my mother's will leaving the house to me. She expressed frustration that she had been involved with Andrew to protect my property, and I had betrayed her instead. I chuckled at her insults, recognizing they stemmed from a place of pain. I thanked her and wished her good luck with her endeavors before ending the call and blocking her. A few days later, she called me from an unknown number, possibly a friend's or colleague's phone. She informed me that Andrew had broken up with her. He had somehow discovered her true intentions, that she was only with him for the inheritance, and he had dumped her, labeling her as a greedy witch. She ranted about how she had tried to help him cope with loneliness, and yet he had turned against her. Despite her exposed truth, she continued to portray herself as virtuous. I sarcastically responded, highlighting the contradiction between her actions and her selfless claims. She insisted that she had been with Andrew for my sake, with the aim of securing the mansion for me. Now she was trying to spin her actions as aiding Andrew in his time of need. Her persistence didn't end there. She made numerous attempts to contact me, pleading, and at times gaslighting me in an effort to reconcile. She even showed up uninvited at my home, my workplace, and various public locations I frequented. To my disbelief, she even appeared at my gym, attempting to corner me and engage in conversation. It was a nightmarish ordeal, but I treated her as a complete stranger, which technically she was, considering our divorce was finalized. Update. I thought this whole ordeal had come to a close, but my past resurfaced as soon as I changed the ownership of the mansion to my name. I can't fathom her fixation on the house. I mean, sure, who wouldn't want to own $1 million mansion? But I don't know how long it will take for her to grasp reality. After 6 months of my divorce, I made the decision to transfer the mansion into my name. As I mentioned earlier, I had held off on this due to financial constraints. Now that I was divorced and my expenses had significantly decreased, I managed to save up enough for the ownership transfer in about 4 to 5 months. Before initiating the transfer process, I informed Andrew about my intentions. He had already moved out of the house after I learned about his affair with Celia. I didn't ask him to vacate, but he willingly removed his remaining belongings. He also made me the administrator of the house's locking system. The paperwork took a couple of months to finalize, during which time I had the mansion painted. Additionally, the neglected lawn and pool received some much-needed maintenance. I had no contact with Celia, and as far as I knew, Andrew had broken up with her, so I was taken aback when she appeared at the mansion during one of the cleaning days. I wasn't present at the time, but the cleaning manager contacted me to report that a woman had arrived and was wandering around inside the house. They tried to prevent her from entering further, but she claimed to be my wife, ironically. Nevertheless, her behavior raised suspicions that she might be trespassing. Indeed, she was trespassing, and I instructed them to escort her out, emphasizing that I had no wife. They complied with my request and confirmed that she had left the premises. It's no surprise that she eventually showed up at my residence. She was sobbing and insisting that I had abandoned her without cause, asserting her innocence and pure intentions. I suggested she seek therapy and possibly consider a mental health facility instead of coming to my home. She wanted me to let her inside for a conversation, but I declined, firmly shutting the door. Last month, I decided to rent out the mansion to a family. Initially, I contemplated moving in to save on rent for my current apartment, but after crunching the numbers, it didn't make sense. The rent for the mansion is at least twice, if not more, than what I pay for my apartment. Moreover, the house is far too spacious for a single person. If I ever get married and start a family in the future, I may consider moving there, but for now, that's not in the cards. I've also obtained a restraining order against Celia for the mansion property. While the likelihood of her trespassing or causing damage was low because she hadn't shown violent tendencies, I wanted to ensure the safety and peace of mind of the new tenants. I didn't want Celia to unnecessarily trouble them. So far, everything has been going smoothly, and I hope I won't have to provide any further updates on this matter. I'm eager to close the chapter with Celia and move forward with my life.
All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in.
Is there any way I can mend my relationship with my dad, even though he disowned me and made it clear he wants nothing to do with me? I'm a 26-year-old female. My mom is 45 and my dad is 46. It's going to be a challenging and difficult journey, but I'm prepared for harsh words, insults, and curses because after all I've been through, I can handle them. I never imagined I'd find myself in this situation. My life is a complete mess right now. I'm my parents' only child. They met when they were just 16 years old and had me when my mom was 19 and my dad was 20. I was an unplanned pregnancy. My father was an exceptional man that any woman would want to be with. He took care of everything, from cooking to working, and he practically worshipped the ground my mom walked on. I never saw any negative qualities in him. He was a devoted family man, someone you'd want to spend your life with. My mom was great too. She was always there for me and helped me in any way she could. My dad wanted more children, but my mom didn't. She never told me why. So when I was 16, my mom was 35 then, my dad had an accident that left him bedridden for 7 months. While we didn't have to worry about finances, I was attending a private school. We're not from the United States, but it's still costly where we live, and there were bills to pay. My mom got a job, and for the following months, she was in my dad's shoes, doing everything. I also helped her with chores from time to time. Here's the twist. She met someone and became emotionally involved. One day, my dad had been bedridden for about 5 months at that point, if I remember correctly. She came to my room and quietly broke down in tears after my dad had fallen asleep. She confessed that she had feelings for someone at work and was no longer attracted to my dad. The entire situation was too much for her, and she had her own needs. She showed me her text messages and told me about the guy. He was 26 at the time, and they were flirting. I was young at the time, and seeing her break down like that shattered my heart. I wasn't as close to my dad as I was to my mom, mostly because my mom spent more time with me than my dad did at that time. Though I know it sounds silly, but I was a teenager then. I told her I understood and that I'd cover for her. She started coming home later, and we both told my dad it was due to her work. I didn't get involved until one day when my mom told me she wanted to talk about something very important. We went out, and I met the guy for the first time. He was rather unsavory, dressed shabbily, and nothing like my dad. I couldn't understand why my mom would choose this jerk over my dad. We sat down for dinner at a fancy restaurant, and my mom told me she was expecting a baby. I was shocked. They had the audacity to kiss right in front of me, and I felt repulsed by them. I asked them what their plan was. My mom said she didn't know. She wanted to keep the baby but still loved my dad. It was an awkward evening, and we went home that night. We talked into the night, and she expressed her desire to keep the baby. I, once again, foolishly chose to keep my mouth shut. After this, my mom broke the news to my dad that she was pregnant. My dad was overjoyed but visibly concerned about our finances, which were still uncertain. Over the next 2 months, he started exercising and undergoing therapy to return to work, even though doctors said he needed more time. He eventually returned to work and put my mom back into her previous role as a stay-at-home mom. Her affair was short-lived. When my brother was born, my dad didn't sign the birth certificate. He purchased a set of documents but refused to inform me about their contents. My mom was still recovering from a C-section, and he didn't share any information with me. He declined to acknowledge my brother. After my mom returned home, he dropped the bombshell that he wanted a divorce. It blindsided my mom, causing her to experience a mental breakdown. She pleaded and cried uncontrollably. My dad remained indifferent, asserting that he was fully aware of everything. He expressed regret for ever having me, labeling me as ungrateful, entitled, and selfish, just like my mother. An argument erupted while I was holding my brother, during which he insulted her, calling her hurtful names and accusing her of infidelity. Mom continued to sob and beg for forgiveness. He packed his bags and left. They proceeded with the divorce, which took 8 months to finalize. I'm not privy to all the details, but my dad was ordered to pay spousal support to my mom and child support for me. My mom got the house, and apart from that, everything was settled. He willingly surrendered primary custody of me to my mom, even refusing to have visitation on weekends, opting for supervised visits only. He never made an effort to reach out to me. Despite my repeated attempts to contact him during and after the divorce, he never showed any interest in being a part of my life. When I turned 18, he called me once, and I remember feeling elated that day. However, to my surprise, he was cold and distant. He simply expressed his hope for my happiness and claimed to forgive me for my actions, but stated that he could never forget that he was betrayed by his own blood. He disowned me, and those words hit me harder than I could have imagined. I fell to the ground and wept. I hurled insults at my mom, blaming her for tearing our family apart. I even lashed out at my brother, viewing him as a constant reminder of my lost father. After the divorce, my mom never really dated anyone. She fell into a state of depression and settled for a mediocre but decent-paying job. She rented out one of the rooms in our house to make ends meet. She still observes her wedding anniversary and occasionally sheds tears. My brother frequently inquires about his father, but I can only respond with, "We don't have one." It's been 9 years since the divorce, and my mom has never truly moved on. She occasionally has casual relationships, but has never considered settling down. She believes that her $60,000 a year job and the rent from a single room are sufficient to sustain us for the rest of our lives. On the other hand, my dad managed to turn his life around. He started a business, remarried, and now has a son. I often check his social media profile. He has never accepted my friend or follow request, and he ignores my texts. However, What I've come to realize is that he's living a wonderful life. I understand that I don't have the right to say this, as I am just as responsible as my mom for the turmoil in our lives and my brother's life. But I miss my dad. I miss him dearly. I miss the moments when we were a family. I've experienced heartbreaks, graduated, and even been in an accident, all without my dad by my side. It feels like an unbearable pain inside me. I've attempted to arrange a meeting with him, but when he learned of my intentions, he moved to another city. Last year, I had a son who bears a striking resemblance to my dad. I want to name him after my dad and introduce them. I'll be getting married at the end of this year, and there's nothing I want more than for my dad to walk me down the aisle. I messed up, and I wish he would shout at me, tell me I don't deserve to be his daughter. I want him to be angry, but I also want him in my life. I want my dad. Not a single day has gone by in all these years where I haven't missed him. I've sent lengthy emails explaining and apologizing, but there has been no response. I did meet him once in November 2020. I approached him and said hi while he was with his son and wife. He looked me straight in the eyes and asked, "Who am I?" When I tearfully told him I was his daughter, he said he didn't have one and walked away. My fiancé was there to support me. My dad is not a bad person by any means. He did what any typical person in his situation would do. I know I don't have the right to apologize or ask him for anything, but just once, I want him to acknowledge my existence. I simply want him to recognize me for a single day, which is on my wedding day, and I want him to look me in the eyes and say that I'm his daughter.